We recently talked about Obama's plan to make our healthcare industry a socialized medicine plan. The promises made by our administration say that this bill will be debt neutral and that you can keep your own provider and insurance that you currently have. Well, joining us today to take a closer look at this massive bill is Robert Moffat with the Heritage Institute, who has been studying the so-called healthcare reform.
The week before the July 4th recess, the House leadership unveiled a mammoth 852-page blueprint for overhauling Americans' healthcare system. It has been called the Tri-Committee Health Reform Bill. It's the product of three major House committees: the House Committee on Ways and Means, the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, chaired by Henry Waxman, and the House Committee on Education and Labor, chaired by Congressman George Miller of California. And while the committee chairmen have conducted the first round of hearings on the bill, the congressional leadership, at the urging of President Obama, would like to see the measure pass the House of Representatives by July 31st, 2009. So we are faced here with, in effect, a health bill the size of a telephone book, and it's going to result in federal control over the healthcare sector of the economy, with the implementation of far-reaching policies that will impact doctors and patients in both the public and the private sector.
What are the main points of the bill?
Michael, there are three big things in this bill which have a tremendous impact on the future of Americans' health care and how they get it. The bill would create a government-run health care plan that would compete against private health insurance plans. The sponsors of the bill say that they want a level playing field. However, the public plan or the government plan would be pay doctors and hospitals based on the rates of the Medicare program. And because the rates of the Medicare program usually run between 20 and 30% below what are private sector rates, depending on different parts of the country, the public plan would certainly enjoy an advantage in competition with the private plans. Of course, at the same time, the taxpayers would assume the risk for the public plan. So we can expect that with the taxpayers assuming the risk with the public plan and private health care plans having to assume risks on their own, there would really be no possibility of what we would call a level playing field. Basically, it's hard to imagine a level playing field where the Congress creates a government health plan to compete against private health plans while also creating the rules for its competitors. A second feature of this major bill is the creation of a national health insurance exchange.
Well, how does that work?
This will be, in effect, a national which will include private health plans as well as the public health plan, which is going to compete against them. In the House bill, the health insurance exchange is going to be governed by a commissioner. It will be a national institution, but it's not going to be simply a market creator. It's going to be a powerful regulatory agency. And combined with the right to set federal benefits for all private plans as well as the public plan, it is likely that the national exchange is going to become an engine that is not going to expand choice, but rather limit choice and reduce competition. The federal government, after all, is going to be in the business of deciding what kind of health care plans are going to be able to compete in the national market, and the federal government is also going to set up what kind of benefits people will get, will establish the kind of benefits people will get in health insurance coverage. Which brings me to the third point. Congress would require every American to have health insurance that the Congress itself would define as acceptable coverage. So you may have health insurance today, but that doesn't necessarily mean that tomorrow that coverage would be acceptable coverage. Under the terms of the House bill, if you have existing coverage, that coverage would be grandfathered. But the content of health insurance would change over time and would be legally required to conform to federal standards over time. In group insurance, there would be a 5-year grace period. At the end, in any event, the individual insurance market or health care plans bought in the individual health insurance market would, after a time, no longer be considered acceptable coverage. Finally, the bill contains both an individual mandate to buy health insurance and a mandate on employers to provide a level of insurance that is approved by the government. Under the bill, an individual would be required to enroll in an acceptable health plan or face a tax penalty. There would be an exception for hardship cases.
Mandated? Well, what would the penalty be if you choose not to participate?
If an individual did not have an acceptable health plan, the individual would be subjected to a tax penalty of some sort. For employers would be required to offer, again, an acceptable health care plan, or they would be required to pay a tax. It is estimated the tax would be an 8% payroll tax. As economists note, the cost of an employer mandate is not normally borne by employers, but it is invariably passed on to employees in the form of a wage reduction or a reduction in other compensation or even job loss. Michael, there is no estimate of wage or employment reductions in the House bill right now. That's to come. In any event, the president has said repeatedly that if Americans like their private health insurance, they would be able to keep it. But in fact, the incentives that are built into the House bill, a combination of mandates and a provision for a public plan, would certainly guarantee that millions of Americans would lose their private health insurance coverage, regardless of their personal preferences. Indeed, the Lewin Group estimated that 113.5 million people would lose their coverage under the terms of the House bill if the enrollment were universal, open to every employee, and the government plan, used Medicare rates. But we don't know what the real cost yet of the House bill will be.
Well, thanks for analyzing this for us, Robert.
Savage. Michael Savage. Afternoons 3 to 7 on Talk 910 KNEW and online at 910KNEW.com.